The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline, close to 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 103 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on Thursday, February 24th, 2022, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's flight, we discuss the recent events on board an American Airlines flight that caused the captain to make a decision to divert the aircraft after an onboard disturbance turned into a security threat. I'm also joined on the flight deck today by Alex Daigle. He is here to discuss his successful completion of an ATP CTP program out of flight safety in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So stay with us while we run our final checklists as we prepare to depart on Flight 103 of the Squawk Ident podcast.
The elite, best of the best. We'll make you better. We'll make you better.
Well, today, as you can tell, I am running solo, at least for this part of the show. The boys are all stuck somewhere out in the system due to this recent storm that's passing through most of the Midwest and in Texas. I'd like to give a shout out to Kyle, who's stuck in Philadelphia on his attempt to deadhead back to base. Rob is currently on a deadhead flight from Boston back to Dallas. And Roger, well, he's in the Dominican Republic, babysitting two airplanes and just enjoying himself in the sunlight. So I really don't feel bad for Captain Roger. What I would like to start off the show today with is a look at American Airlines Flight 1775 that departed Los Angeles on Sunday, February 13th at 11:15 a.m. en route to Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. Now, on a side note, as a pilot, if you find yourself flying into Reagan National Airport or DCA, note and do not make the same mistake I did. Quick side story. My first time flying into Reagan National, I read the approach plates. I studied the approach criteria. The captain I was flying with was a Czech airman who was very experienced. And as we were flying in, I was a new hire at a regional airline over at Sandpiper. And I was told to contact Tower. So I read the name of the airport right off the approach plate, and I called it Reagan Tower. And the controller responded with, "Oh, Reagan Tower, huh?" And the captain looked at me and he said, "What did you do?" And she's like, "Well, I guess you're cleared the visual." And I was then informed that the controllers at Reagan National Airport do not like to be called Reagan Tower, and it has to do with the fact that Reagan made the controllers go back to work when they were striking many years ago. You can look up on Wikipedia to get the history of it. So whenever you fly into DCA, make sure you call it Washington Tower, and they would very much appreciate that. So enough about the politics of aviation. Let's get into this article posted on simpleflying.com by Luke Bedell, published on February 14th, 2022. The article is entitled, American Airlines Flight Diverts After Passenger Tries to Open the Door. The unruly passenger attempted to breach the cockpit and open an exit door before he was subdued by passengers and crew. And this is particularly what I wanted to focus on. An American Airlines flight from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. had to land in Kansas City after a passenger tried to force their way into the cockpit before attempting to open an exit door. Other passengers and cabin crew stopped the unruly passenger before the plane made an emergency landing in Kansas City. According to eyewitnesses, the passenger attempted to breach the cockpit and open the plane door. Reports indicate that the passenger was a middle-aged man who had been behaving strangely earlier in the flight. A recording between the pilot and air traffic control captured the incident.
Yeah, he's trying to get into the cockpit for American 1775. 1575 left, thanks.
The flight, operated with an Airbus A320neo, took off from LAX at 9:17 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and was approximately 3 hours into its journey before the incident occurred. Local and federal law enforcement met the aircraft in Kansas City before taking the passenger into custody, an FBI Special Agent Charles Dayob said. A combination of passengers and flight crew stopped the passenger. Reports suggest that one flight attendant repeatedly used a coffee pot to subdue the individual, who ended up bleeding profusely. A passenger on board, Moaz Mostafa, told CNN. Mr. Mostafa uploaded a video of the incident to his Twitter account. Of course he did. Passengers on board the aircraft were then rescheduled onto another flight. They waited at Kansas City International Airport for around 3 hours before boarding their rescheduled flight. 2021 saw over 1,000 FAA investigations into unruly onboard behavior. This amounted to more investigations in 1 year than the combined 7 previous years. The FAA has received 5,981 reports over 2021 alone, with 72% of those related to masks. This incident does not appear to be mask-related. Just a month ago, another American Airlines flight experienced a similar incident after a passenger flying from Honduras to Miami breached the cockpit during the boarding process. And according to another article from a Kansas City NBC affiliate, KSHB, posted by Sam Hartle, when the commotion started, Karen Alston, a passenger on the flight sitting in row 17A, says she was simply watching a movie when, quote, all of a sudden the cabin lights came on and I saw about 8 men jump ahead towards first class. She said, We started descending very, very quickly and I knew we were landing. I knew immediately we were landing. As a frequent flyer on American Airlines, Alston said she never imagined she would witness something of this nature. She thanks the men and women who saved her life and the lives of the others on the flight. She was also quoted as saying, life is a precious thing that we would all like to continue. And so, in hindsight, I am thankful for the men that risked their lives to save ours today. They are heroes and they deserve to be praised, Alston said. Once the FBI completed interviews, the remaining passengers were expected to resume their flights to Washington, as they did. Now, what I wanted to talk about was the fact that these kind of incidences are becoming more and more common. And not in a million years that I think when I started my journey in aviation that I would have to be considering all the security threats that are happening today. So it's important to keep your head on a swivel, keep your chin up, keep your eyes open. If you see something that just makes your subconscious say, this isn't right, if you see it, say something about it. We cannot be too careful in this day and age. And my hat's off to the flight attendant crew, the cabin crew, and the flight deck crew for doing such a fantastic job. And I just cannot thank enough the able-bodied passengers, or the ABPs, that stepped up in this incident. Now, I'm no stranger to these kind of events. I've had a few myself in my career, and they are extremely nerve-wracking and stressful. We don't know what someone is going to do when they do the unexpected like this. And when you're trapped in a pressurized tube 6 miles over the surface of the earth, traveling at 500 miles an hour, there is no tolerance for this kind of behavior. So whenever a cabin crew member finds themselves in a fight to save the lives of everyone on board, you use whatever means necessary. Coffee pots, tray tables, anything you can get your hands on. You can use those carts. Now, we're not going to get into the security sensitive information that the TSA has published, because those are all set for need to know basis only. And disclosing such information is a federal offense. But we can say this: if you find yourself on a flight and you see something that's going on, by all means, if you are able-bodied, do what you can, because the life you save will definitely be your own. Joining us today from Studio 405 from the La Quinta Inn and Suites in West Euless, in the DFW area, braving a winter storm that has grounded almost hundreds, if not more than hundreds of flights in the last day and a half. He was supposed to go home a day and a half ago, and he's stuck there at the La Quinta, of all places. Brave man, I tell you. Help us in congratulating a newly minted ATP Written graduate from the ATP course there in Texas, Alex Daigle. Alex, welcome back to the show, and how are you?
Cold, Tony. I'm really cold. A whopping 28 degrees here in Euless outside of the airport, and just trying to stay warm and try to stay sane while I wait until Saturday to get home.
I can't believe that. I mean, you're there a week doing the training, doing the ground course, and you passed your ATP Written. Congratulations on behalf of all of us here and all the listeners as well, I'm sure. Congratulations is in order. An ATP Written is no easy task. It's one of the most difficult written exams that a pilot will take in their journey in aviation. And you took yours and passed. I really had a big smile on my face when you text me your passing certificate, your slip. And we're just so very proud of you. And we have you on the show today because we wanted to talk to you a little bit about your experience. On the last show, we talked about you were getting ready to go. You had amassed enough hours. You had your conditional letter of employment from the airline we call Sandpiper. And this was the week where you actually went and got certified. Walk us through that process. How did it all begin?
So Sandpiper was wonderful enough to send me out here on one of their parent company's flights, put me up in the glorious La Quinta Inns and Suites here in Euless for the week. And it started out by going to the facility, ATP Jets, here in the DFW area, and getting indoctrinated, kind of checked in, getting you kind of all set up in your classroom, getting you a tour of the facility so that you can kind of see where things are. And from there, it rolled immediately into our day one stuff of learning and basically covering over the course of 4 days in classrooms, a whole bunch of stuff. And I have kind of just day one was high altitude aerodynamics, stall prevention and upset prevention recoveries, airplane weather detection systems, air carrier low visibility operations, and operational control, which talked about dispatchers and dispatching flights and all that stuff. And I actually, I learned more about, out of that whole day, I learned more of what the dispatcher does and how truly efficient they are and how well they help an airline. So that was my biggest, out of all of them, that was the big takeaway from that, out of that day. A lot of the stuff was kind of, I wouldn't say a refresher, but it was kind of just reinforcing topics that you had to study and know going into your interviews and even into some of the private pilot, commercial pilot stuff. I mean, everybody knows how to recover from a stall. Lower your nose, add some power, right? Get airflow going over the wings, right? So that's nothing new that we haven't learned going way back into early days. But obviously the big thing with that is they talk about when you recover from a stall, it may take 5, 6, 7,000 feet coming from 35,000 to recover from that stall. Yeah. So, and it's different. It's different with the aerodynamics of it all.
Yeah. The first time I think that happened to me in the simulator was when I was at Sandpiper as a new hire, and they had to demonstrate high altitude stall recovery. And it was such an eye-opening experience, as you're mentioning, because in a Cessna or 152 or 172 or in a Piper Arrow or whatever you're flying, even a Seminole or Archer, the stall recovery technique is relatively simple and it's very quick. I mean, it's so responsive. Push the nose over, add some power, and within a matter of feet, you can recover the aircraft if you're on the spot, and you recover quickly. And when you're in a swept wind turbine aircraft, and you're at high elevation above 27, 28, 29,000 feet, getting into the 30s, and you take the airplane and put it into a slow speed stall, it takes a long time to recover. You push that nose over, and that elevator authority is spongy, it's minimal, and by the time your nose goes forward, and you probably experienced this in the simulator, if you had some simulator time, that if you react and go, okay, the nose is over, and I can bring it back up slowly to minimize you're just going to a secondary stall.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we experienced. So we got so we did 4 days of class, right? And I'll talk about the other days here in a second, what we covered. But when we went into the sims, that we did actually do upset. We did both high speed and low speed recoveries up at altitude. And there's they put us into the situation where they kind of showed us what coffin corner looks like up at altitude. And then I think we did it in the ERJ. We actually got to be in a 170, so it's actually kind of nice because that's hopefully the plane that I'm going to be flying for Sandpiper. So it's nice to actually get into that airplane and see how it is. Yeah. But we did a high speed and low speed recovery on the high altitude stall / mock buffet, and man, the brilliant thing about it is, like, it takes. I think it took me. I think we started my stall at 35,000 feet. And I didn't recover until just about 30,000. And that was pushing the nose over. And you have to watch your speed tape. And they say the green dot on the speed tape, if you know what I'm talking about, the green dot, you have to get above the green dot to be able to start your recovery. And man, that it took 5,000 feet when in a Cessna, if you're, like you're saying, if it's good enough, like, you really can recover in 50 feet.
Yeah.
It's really just releasing the control pressure and letting that airplane stabilize. This one, you have to force it to recover. Mm-hmm. So it was eye-opening. Really, it was. What was even cooler, though, was the mock buffet demo, and that is violent. It shakes violently.
Yeah. Did you shake the sim off of motion? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I do know what you're talking about, but no, we did not. We actually, when we were in the 320 sim, my sim partner was doing a contaminated runway takeoff, and it was an icy condition simulation.
Sure.
And the instructor failed the engine and below VMCG, so it was a contamination plus VMCG demo, and he stood on that rudder and broke the rudder.
Oh wow!
They had to come. The tech guys had to come and reset the sim for us because we had no rudder authority after that. Basically, the sim said, "You put too much. I don't know what you want, so I'm just going to stop." Yeah.
Yeah. There's like I forget how many pounds of, like, is it 50 or 55 pounds of foot pressure. And I could be way off on that, but I know there's a certain pounds of pressure. Once you exceed that, the servo or feel back unit, whatever it is, the artificial feel back unit in the simulator says, "Oh, you've exceeded the pressure. This is going offline." And then you have to restart the entire simulator. When you have the computer that runs those multi-million-dollar CAE sims, or they're in a room. Modern day computers in an entire room, and there are multiple servers, because there's millions, if not billions, of data entry points. There are scenarios possible for the simulator, and I mean, there's like the computer that just deals with the motion. There's the other computer that deals with just the visuals that are being projected. I mean, when you're in there, it's like you're outside on a real airplane. Now, granted, you could see. The human eye is good enough. It can tell the difference. You can see the visualization, computer buffeting, the blurriness of motion is there that it's not in real life. But those simulators are so realistic.
Oh, yeah. No, so we did 3 different sims, 3 different times. And we did, I have the notes for it. It's called a level 5. That's the full mock-up non-motion simulator, and that was our 7-3. That was our first day into it. And even that with the no motion was still so realistic of like being in an airplane. Yeah, you can look out the screen and you're like, okay, I can see that the semi-cheesy computer graphics of like out in the distance, but as far as you're concerned, when you're in there, it flies and responds exactly like an airplane does.
Yeah.
You know, you treat it exactly like an airplane.
Yeah.
You know, even though you're going into
did you hear that
box.
this week? Treat it like an airplane. Don't treat it like a computer.
No, actually, we didn't hear that many times. It's just, I mean, we kind of knew going into it. I mean, it's an airplane. You know what I mean? Regardless of if it's sitting on the ground or up on some hydraulics, it's still an airplane, and it still does the exact same thing. The only difference is you have a nice pause button that you can hit to, you know, talk about things and redo things, and oh, hey, let's not do it that way. And
so,
you know,
what happened there?
Exactly. And that's exactly what it is. Is that we had a couple of times of like, yeah, I wouldn't do it that way. Let's try that one again. You know.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting that you. So this, and you're going to get into more detail here as we progress through your experience with it. But this program, it really is so in depth. I mean, you got simulator time and different simulators. So let's get it back to the cycle of events. You spent the first day in the simulator.
No. So we spent 4 days in class.
Oh, okay.
4 days in class, and then 3 in the sim.
Okay, so 4 days of ground school instruction, reviewing what you were going to do for the simulator event, and going through the required knowledge for the ATP test.
Yes. That is actually 100% what it is. Is it's basically a wicket mark at this point for the FAA to say you've gone through this course. Obviously, this is all in light of the Colgan air crash that sparked this whole 1,500 hours, and you know, going through this more, I wouldn't say in-depth training, but getting, you know, the new pilots coming in, the kind of the more knowledge into this world of, you know, how airplane operations work, how airline operations work, how transport category crafts differ from, you know, 172s. The class of 45 of us, there were, I think, a handful, and when I mean handful, I mean less than like 6 people that had some kind of outside jet or turbine aircraft experience. Like the girl that I sat next to in class, I actually sat next to my buddy from my flight school, who's going on to Gold Standard Airlines. And shout out to Daniel Shimon for passing his ATP written and moving on to Gold Standard Airlines. That he we sat next to each other, so it was nice to actually have somebody in there that we knew. But the girl I sat next to, she was a C-130 driver. There was a couple Blackhawk guys from the Army, a couple corporate guys, but the majority of us were all 172 instructors from around the country. So, well, I say 172, I use that term loosely. GA, single engine, small aircraft,
normally aspirated, all that.
Yeah, all that good jazz, right? That was us. That was us around the country that were there. And I mean, there's people from Miami to the Midwest to the Pacific Northwest. There's actually a guy from Riverside ATP that was there that Daniel knew. So it was kind of nice to actually have like some connection to Southern California. So, but yeah, we all didn't have this experience. You know, we don't have jet experience. So this was eye-opening for us. Obviously, going through all this stuff, talking about crew fatigue and you know, physiology for flight and checklists and man, how checklists are a major thing. And actually, surprisingly, when we were in the 320 sim, the checklist for the 320 was a Spirit Airlines 320 sim, because they have some location there, right? But their checklist was like a 5x7 note card, double-sided.
Yeah.
And it was it was shocking. Yeah, that was it. It was because, you know, most airlines, you guys are, when you guys get into the cockpit, you guys are going through flows and, you know, and doing everything to set everything up in a flow and then just bouncing that off of each other. So it was, now I'm not putting
8 by 8. I think it's 8.5 by 8.5 for, this is the checklist that we use on the A320 family of aircraft over at Legacy Airlines. For those of you listening, it's an 8 by 8 white double-sided checklist and it's in chronological order. I've laminated mine. It's something that the company allows. You can laminate it. The reason I laminate it is, for one, I don't lose it because it's noisy and it's bright and shiny, and for two, I can wipe it down and stuff, and it doesn't tear and rip and stuff. But yeah, checklist is key. I mean, if you look at that, our before start checklist. Now, granted, we've done our pre-flight flows, triggers and flows and things like that. And this before start checklist, every single flight, because I'm reading it, because I'm the FO, right? The captain is doing the response, unless there is one of these symbols here, which means both cockpit crew members must respond. So, for example, you were talking about the checklist. Spirit Airlines has a checklist that's like a 5x7 card. Now, granted, maybe we're overdoing it at Legacy, I think sometimes, but every single flight, recorder ground controller, the other person says on, AML flight forms, the captain says onboard reviewed, and the first officer also says onboard reviewed, and they note the aircraft tail number to make sure you're in the right tail number. And what they're checking on that is that the tail number on the placard, the tail number on the flight plan, and the tail number on the AML, that's key, are all the same. Because how many times has maintenance come on board, they fixed something, and they had 3 AML books under their arm, and they threw the AML book in the cockpit and said, all right, you guys are good to go. The pilots take off, and then they realize, oh, we got the wrong book in our airplane. We're not legal. And so the checklist is extensive. It's crucial. And what did do you remember what you had on the Airbus checklist there for any of those?
They gave us a little like ATP checklist, nothing fancy like that. It was just enough to get us moving, right? Like it was, obviously that's more airline specific, and this is super generic stuff, right? But okay. I mean, for the most part, I was looking in there, the before start, you had 11 items in there, and I think we had like 5 or 6.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah,
I mean, we get, the whole point of this wasn't to train us to be an Airbus pilot. The whole point of this was to get us turbine experience and be in a crew environment, which was the overall arching theme, and get us a little bit of jet time and have some fun while doing it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. You got to log your simulator time.
I did. I have now 10 hours in a level D or level 5 full simulator. So I have real jet experience. I'm a real pilot now.
That's such a fantastic experience. So your ground training, was that 8 hours every day?
Pretty much. Other than the last day, we were pretty much 8 to 5 or 6 every day. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot. And I have a spiral notebook that's 3/4 of the way full of notes. Mm-hmm. So the one thing I will say for the future aviators that are trying to go through this is they're not going to kind of stop and talk about each slide individually. They will, right? But if you want to take notes like I took notes, take pictures and transpose them later, because sometimes they're just going to go through a slide and they're just going to be like, oh yeah, we talked about that, and clicked right through it. And you're like, but notes. Thank you.
It's like the pig in Toy Story where he's flipping through the channels. That's the way your instructor is in the ground school when they're going through the mandatory slides. You go, okay, this slide. Okay, any questions? Okay, let's move on. And the slide.
100%. I mean, at the end of the day, you also got to remember that they're trying to get through these courses, and they do these courses starting Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays every week.
I got bronchitis.
Yeah. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, and I liked our instructor to a certain point, but he would go off on rabbit holes, so people would refrain from asking him questions because he would spend 30 minutes down a rabbit hole that didn't need to be spent because someone asked him a question, and he would start going off and going off and going off.
Yeah.
So, but not discrediting the guy at all. He was very knowledgeable and had a good amount of time in it. He was a retired American guy. 7.3 Mad Dog. I forget what else he flew. He was with Envoy, or not Envoy. Sandpiper, when Sandpiper was Sandpiper.
Wings West,
No.
Nashville Eagle,
Well, yeah,
American Eagle.
He was Eagle, and Eagle before it was Eagle.
Oh, okay. So he was original American Eagle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, because
He's
American
got time
Eagle,
in the ATR.
back in the 90s, American Eagle was created when AMR, which was the parent company of American Airlines, they started buying all of these commuters that they were contracting out to do a lot of their domestic feed from essential air service airports to the hubs to feed the hubs the passengers that they were using for then connect through other hubs. So these commuter airlines were like making a lot of money because they were growing, and these small populations were growing more and more people were flying. So instead of giving them out all this contract work, they just bought them up and they created one regional airline. And at the time, regional airline was not a thing. It was commuters. Were then, the nicknames were puddle jumpers, right? They were all always turboprops and whatnot. But now these commuter airlines were buying bigger and better airplanes and even some turbine-powered aircraft. And so they bought them up and they combined Wings West, Nashville Eagle, and a bunch of others. I'll have to look them up. But they combined them and they made one regional airline that was wholly owned, named American Eagle. And a lot of pilots that have since retired from the main line over there at American started their routes flying for a commuter that was later merged into a regional airline that was later then gave them the experience in order to apply for and go to a main line, because there was no flow through at the time. So, yeah. Interesting stuff.
No, so you're looking at I just pulled it up off of Wikipedia, the regional wholly owned carriers for it that merged to create what would be Eagle was Executive, Flagship, Simmons, and Wings West.
Simmons, okay, yeah.
And then they would later purchase Metro to include in all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was. I believe he was Metro, because I remember hearing that he was Metro, and then they obviously merged in with Eagle. So he was there for like 15 or 17 years before flowing, when there wasn't a thing called the flow into American, and ended up retiring from American. So
wow.
Super knowledgeable.
Yeah, super experienced person leading the class. That's always fantastic to hear. So many of these classes, like I remember having classes back in the day where the instructor was the youngest person in the class, and they were teaching the ground school because they studied it at whatever university they went to, and they're doing this while they're building time so that they can get hired on to a regional airline. So they weren't even a qualified regional pilot, but they were teaching the ground school, or the systems portion at least of the ground schools, teaching you how the hydraulic system works for that particular aircraft. So when you have someone that has real life experience, not to take away from the lesson that inexperienced person may give, because they'll know that system like the back of their hand, and that's really all that needs to be conveyed there. But when you have someone that has a life experience, they bring just that little added touch to where they can go down a rabbit hole and get into the fine detail or get into the weeds about a particular system. And that knowledge base is so valuable to have, and such a pleasure to have that experience. Now, on day one, you said you had high altitude stalls and a coffin corner and all this stuff. And what was like day two and day three like?
So day two was physiology for flight and fitness for duty operations. Kind of going into the basic stuff that you get into, in private pilot stuff, but obviously touching more on crew rest requirements and what crew rest requirements are, and how soon you can touch a trip after being on rest and stuff like that. So that was nice. Communications, which that to me, communications and checklist philosophy kind of is like stuff that you're imprinting into, young private pilots in how you're teaching them, but it's expounded upon more into this world because, communications don't necessarily include regular radio voice in the airline worlds, right? Like you got your ACARs that, you can get direct text messages basically from your dispatcher, or you can have the pre-departure clearance where it's all digital and you just hit the print button and it prints out for you. So you don't have to talk to a controller.
Yeah.
Or like if you're at a super busy airport, like Chicago, you get put into, ground queue, or I forget what it is. Metering. What they called it, but
ground metering.
Yeah, ground metering, right? Where you call them when you're basically ready to taxi, and they say, "Cool, let's have you park over here and wait for 20 minutes while we get you a ground taxi clearance."
Yeah, busy airports, and some airports, like you mentioned, Chicago is prime example. Their ground metering is on pretty much all day. Late at night, they turn it off. But so when you're in the alley and you've got, you're at the airplane, they're ready to close the door, you're talking to the rampers, and you have to get clearance for your pushback. So you contact ramp control, which is either a company or your own company, depending. And you ask for permission for pushback and start. And they'll tell you clear to push tail west, clear to push to spot 5, clear to push to the T, clear to push to the X, whatever. And so then you relay that to your ground controller, and that's how you get clearance to get pushed back in the alley. You start up the engines, the tug driver disconnects the tow bar from the aircraft, the wing walkers make sure there's clearance. They show you the pin, the nose gear pin, that the bypass switch has been reinstalled. So now you have noseable steering, because they usually disconnect that for their safety. And then once all that's done, you got at least one engine running. You run through your after start flow or your checklist, depending on the carrier you work for. Then you're going to contact ramp control again. We do this at Los Angeles every time. When you contact the ramp controller, you then say, okay, we are ready to taxi. And they'll tell you, okay, contact ground metering or ground, or taxi up to the top of the alley and then contact ground. In Phoenix, you just contact the north ground or the south ground, depending on where you're parked. In Chicago, you contact metering when you're number 1. And the metering controller, you tell them who you is, where you at, what you want. That's what you tell them, right? So you tell them who you are, where you are, what alley you're in, what line you're on, north line, south line, whatever. And the information that you have, ATIS information. We have information Zulu, right? They'll tell you, all right, monitor ground. So now you have it already in your radio control panel, and you just flip that toggle switch. And so now that becomes active. Now in Chicago, you wait for them to call you. You don't call them. In Dallas, it's the same thing. There is no ground metering in Dallas unless there's bad weather, and that will be on the ATIS for taxi contact metering. But most of the time, it's just contact ground. So you're number 1 at the top of the alley. They give you a spot. You're on spot 124, and you don't call them. They call you, and they'll just say spot 124. And you heard that, and you're on spot 124. So you'll say Legacy 145 with information Zulu ready to taxi. And they'll tell you bridge route, whatever, 25 left, whatever. I don't know. And
that's something we learned too, is like pre-programmed taxi routes, where you talk about bridge route, or they have them at different airports where they basically tell you your clearance and say you are following this to the T. It would be basically, for the people who don't really understand it, it's a ground-based version of an arrival or a departure, a sit or a star. It literally tells you follow this, brings you to X runway. And once you're at X runway lineup, then you get in the queue with tower and wait for your turn to leave.
Yeah. And if you're using an electronic flight bag or an EFB, then whatever program your carrier is using, in our case, we use the Jeppesen app. So in the Jeppesen app, and they tell you bridge route, and you're like, this is my first time here. What, Captain, do you know the bridge route? And they're like, well, I think so, but look it up. Where do you find it? Sometimes it's under the taxi tab, and it's maybe instead of a 10-9, maybe it's a 10-9 Charlie or a 10-9 Delta or a 10-11 or whatever they designate it. And it's in the actual FAA taxi diagram accoutrement of charts, right? Sometimes it's not there. So where do you find it? And in those cases that it's not under the taxi tab, it'll be under the operations tab. And there'll be an operations tab. Those are the company defined pages. That talks all about, your entries, your gates, your frequencies for your operations, the everything from security codes to get access to the ramp to do a walk around to, after hours phone numbers in case you need to contact someone in the ticket counter. It's all there in your operations tab. Well, sometimes those taxi routes that the airport's using, that's where you're going to find them. So you got to know where to look. And if you don't know, and they tell you to do something in like a coded route, like you said, arrival, and they expect you to do that.
100%. And if you're not doing that, then you have, some kind of runway incursion.
Then you can end up nose to nose with a 747.
End up nose to nose and having to copy down some phone number that you don't need to copy down.
Oh, God, I hate it when that happens.
Yeah.
Come to the
I actually have a funny story with batteries. So I have a travel Roku that we used to have a bunch of TVs in our house, and we still have a bunch of TVs in our house. But one of the TVs went away because my kid didn't want to play on a TV. He wanted to play his Xbox on a monitor. So whatever, he plays on a monitor now, not a TV, which, okay. So when his TV went away, his Roku went away with it because he, plays on his Xbox. His Xbox can do everything that the Roku does.
Right.
So that became our travel Roku. So it comes with us whenever we go. Like if I'm on like a week here, I can watch my Netflix, Hulu, all that stuff. Well, when I got to the hotel room, my batteries were dead. And I don't mean dead; they were leaking dead.
Oh, yeah, because you had
Gotta
always remove the battery. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I realize that now. So when I come home, I'm going to take the batteries out, set them in the bag, but not in the remote. But I got to the hotel room and I was like, shit, like I don't have. It was late, so I was like, shit, I don't have batteries. Oh, good, AAA's are in the remote in the hotel room. Cool. So I took them out and threw them in there, and
forgot
the Roku's. Well, no, I didn't forget.
Put the old batteries in the hotel room.
No. I threw them away because they were leaking and gross. And so I completely just left them, and I was going to leave the hotel and go like, okay, well, I know they have batteries. It's a hotel. I'm sure they do. Right. Cause my Roku has power and volume on it. So I don't need to turn on and off the TV.
Right.
I've got that on my Roku. Cool. So I leave and I'm thinking nothing of it, forget all about it. Right. And, my friend who's in the class with me, who's staying here, he's a Florida-based guy. When we got our hotel rooms all kind of rebooked because we're staying here, he's now in my old room.
And he's like, the TV doesn't work.
Yeah, no, he sends a video just because he was pissed off because he was at the airport for like 4 or 5 hours and tried 2 or 3 different flights and they all got canceled on him. So he's pissed off. He comes back to the hotel room and he was like, man, like, I was just so pissed. I never watched TV and I wanted to watch TV that day. And, and he sends a video and I'm going to see if you can see it.
Oh yeah. There you go. Damn it.
He's just so pissed about it. He's just like, he said, his response to that was, what did he say? I'm so over Texas or something like that. He goes, okay, it's official. Texas sucks, right?
Yeah.
And I said, what room are you in? I said, are you in 423? Because I may or may not have taken those batteries from my Roku.
I heard stories. We used to have this captain that when, was it CFL or yes, compact fluorescent lighting, CFLs were a big thing. Before LED bulbs, they had, they said, oh, get rid of your incandescent bulbs and use CFLs. They're so much better, low energy usage and better for the environment. Not to mention the mercury that's in every single one of those. But anyway, so this captain would like bring his incandescent bulbs from home in his kit bag and switch them out. When he got to a hotel that had fancy.
I've heard of people doing that.
Bastard. Take the batteries out of the remote for their Bose headset.
It wasn't intentional that I was doing it. I just forgot. And, out of sight, out of mind. And then by the time he sent that, I was like, oh shit, I did take those batteries. So that is my room.
Sorry, dude.
So I actually saw him tonight down in the lobby, and he was getting batteries for his TV remote. It just was like, man, what an asshole for people who take those batteries just like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
All right.
Pilots.
So
Can't live with them.
Oh yeah. No,
Anyway.
we're cheap asses.
So day two was very successful. Talk about day three. What was the last day of ground like?
No, there's one more day.
It's 4 days.
There's 2 more. Yeah, 4 days of ground. So day 3 was MELs, CDLs. Actually, that was kind of good because I've talked about MELs, obviously in the private pilot world, but my phrase to those is we don't use those. That's big airline people. So, now I'm becoming big airline people. So now I got to know what those are and how they work. And, not just of like the deferment times of, like a level A, a level B, a level C. Or is it? Yeah, those right. The A, B, C's, and D's.
Category A.
I didn't know if they were
3 days. Yeah. Category B is like 10 days.
No. Category A is specified by maintenance. However long maintenance specifies. Category B is 3 days. Category C is 10 days. And I forget what category D was. At this point.
That can be a time interval up to like 30 or 60, 90 days, something like that.
Oh, no. Category D was 180 days. And he goes, you'll rarely see 180 days.
Yeah, you won't see those. So you never see those, and then when we do see them, it's always the same, category B or category C. It's one of those. And if it's category A, it's hours, like 250 cycles or 250 hours or hobs or whatever. They don't call them hobs in the airline world. They call them cycles. So, but you have no way on the flight deck. You have absolutely no way to tell what that is. You have to either use an app that we do have access to kind of figure out what that tail number is, what their hours on the airframe or hours on the engine or whatever is, or you have to contact SOC. That'll put you through to MOC. So System Stock Operation Control will then, forward you to Maintenance Operation Control, and then you can say, hey, I'm on this airplane. This was written up a long time ago. It said after 10 cycles it needs to be repaired. How many cycles? I don't have any idea. Are we good? Are we legit? And that would be an okay phone call to make.
And that's the thing, is you have to make that phone call, or you have to look and see like, hey, it's been 3 days. Am I hitting my 3-day mark at this flight? Because everything's based off of Zulu time. So if you don't hit your mark, you can actually be illegal to fly with a maintenance item that should be deferred or should be looked at.
Yeah, Rob talked about that a couple shows ago when he was discussing how they were delayed and they were going to return into Dallas late, to the point where if that plane landed after midnight, it would technically have been illegal because it was on their last calendar day for that open write-up. And if they did not land by midnight, there are no extensions to these write-ups. So they would have landed after midnight and therefore been illegal by so many minutes. So they ran the risk of canceling the flight. And fortunately for him, they were able to get out at a decent time and they were able to make it back in DFW and have legality to do it.
Yeah. And that's actually something that's not to be messed around with. Like that can actually throw your career into the hot water there.
Well, at minimum, they'll question, were you aware of this? What were the circumstances that led you to accept an aircraft that was going to go illegal? Did you not notice it? Most of the time, if something like that happens, you'll get come into the chief pilot's office, bring your union representation, and let's talk about this. And if, it was an honest mistake, and if it was something that could have easily been overlooked, then they kind of give you a slap on the wrist. They put something in your P file saying, hey, we talked to you on this date because of this incident. And then that stays in your file for like a year. And then if nothing else happens, they throw it away. Or like you said, you take an airplane that was unsafe due to negligence, that you didn't do your job. You didn't follow your standard operating procedures or your SOPs. And that's what led to the unsafe act. And therefore, you could run the risk of jeopardizing your license. The FAA might have judgment in the worst case scenario where they take every single license away from you. And now you have to go start from the beginning.
Yep. And we actually talked about some of that stuff of like the alcohol stuff, with taking away stuff like that. Alcohol is no joke in the airline world or in flying world in general, but in the airline world, like you lose everything. And there is nothing you can do once it's lost other than start from scratch and build it back up.
Yeah. And I've heard of a few pilots that have done that, and it takes years and especially now, a lot of money.
Well, I was going to say, if you look at it in today's standards, if like say for whatever reason you lose your license for that, right? And I'm using you've got somewhere in the probably neighborhood 15,000 hours as a private or as a pilot, right? So
I think I did 12,000 back in November. So
okay.
Not quite, but close.
But
a lot.
Reasonable amount of time, right? At your point, you're not even counting hours anymore. You're just counting years, right?
I still count my hours. That's not my logbook.
Okay. I'll believe it when I see it.
Paper logbook.
Oh, ooh.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I'm old school,
but
man.
when they talked about that, like let's say and I'm going to use you as an example, so don't take this in any wrong way. I'm going to say you get in trouble for alcohol and you lose your license, right? You have to start all the way back over from private pilot.
That's ridiculous. I would say something like that.
Yeah, right. I don't know where you're getting these influences here, but I just want to say, no, we're not. We're enjoying alcoholic beverages away from work. No flags involved. I don't want to get us both in trouble. As the FAA is listening, hi FAA. But you start over from scratch, right? So that means you have to get at least 40 hours to become a private pilot, at least another 40 hours to become an instrument pilot, another 250 hours to become a commercial.
Yeah, and, I think from what I've heard, your experience does count. So you have to go through whatever the FAA deems or the judge would deem your program. So you lose it. And now you have to go and state your case to re-get it. And they'll go, okay, well, we want you to go through this many hours and complete all of these exams over again. Basically, it's like a financial punishment to your crime, right? And it has to be a crime. There has to be a federal crime committed in order to have the FAA make this kind of action towards someone. Yes, I've heard it happening due to alcohol. Where they've lost everything and they were so passionate about flying, instead of changing careers, they did take the time to do it. Now, I don't think you have to do all the minimum hours you might, but in the case I heard, it was like a couple hundred hours of instruction. And as soon as the instructor says, okay, because your time you have is the time you have, they don't take that away from you.
Yeah. So
if they go, okay, well, if you do 20 hours, we'll get you your private, and another 20 hours, we'll get you your instrument. And if that's what the judge approves, then I think you're okay in those circumstances. But again, these are very unique circumstances. They're very rare. They're like 0.0001% of all judgments towards pilots where they have to go through a program all over again from scratch. But yeah, very serious. And we've had shows where we talk about the HIMSS program. We talk about addiction and pilots, because pilots are people, and people have addictions, and it's a disease. And yes, there are many pilots that we've interviewed here, even on the show, that have gone through the program and are flying successful careers even to this day.
No, and I'm a big advocate of the HIMSS program. I think it's a wonderful thing. We learned a lot about it in the program, or in the course that we went through, and it's there for people who need it, right? Because at the end of the day, addiction is a disease, no different than cancer or Lyme disease or anything like that, right? It's a disease of the brain, right? And it's something that you can't control. So enough of the sadness, right? We'll go back onto some good stuff here. MELs, CDLs, ground ops, turbine engine overviews, airplane performance, transport category airplane performance, not just airplane performance, but transport category performance. Talking about like swept wings and the way that wings are designed and all that stuff. How that all plays into it, especially getting up into the high speed regimes.
Did they stress how important it is to not do a forward slip on approach when you think you're high on a swept wing aircraft?
Actually, yes, they
Yeah, I
did.
know.
They 100% did. And they've got these wonderful things in this airplane called spoilers and speed brakes that just like, wow, it works.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that in the sim.
Now, it's not
those things.
The thing about speed brakes is this. I mean, and I've learned this through time and trial and error, and flying with captains that have, given me advice throughout the years. Speed brakes do an okay job to increase the drag on the wing and slow you down, or, bring in the ability for you to get that next stage of spoilers or flaps, or slow the aircraft down to a safe speed to perform some kind of maneuver or slow down or descent or whatever. However, the best thing I ever heard was an air traffic controller was telling a captain, "Can you expedite your descent?" The captain said, "Sure." And so he started down. And then the controller a little while later said, "I asked you to expedite your descent. Are you doing the best you can?" And the captain said, "Yes, we're giving you the best we can." And the controller says, "Well, what about those speed brakes? Are you using those?" Because he wasn't descending very fast. And the captain said, "That's for when I make a mistake, not when you make a mistake."
Ooh.
Now, the reason the captain had this little, quick-witted response was, when you do use a spoiler in a transport category aircraft, everybody in the back knows. I mean, everything after the wing is just vibrating, shaking. The flight attendant, all the drinks are, vibrating back there. It can be quite uncomfortable. Now, if it's something that's absolutely necessary to slow down, it's a great technique. It's a great tool to keep you out of trouble. Definitely, for sure. But I try not to use it as much as possible. And if I do use it, sometimes if the aircraft you're in allows for it, I'll only use half. Just because when you go to full, especially in the Airbus, it shakes the fuselage well enough, and it's loud.
That is something that I learned. It does definitely, you do feel it. You definitely do feel it. And obviously I don't feel it in the real thing because I haven't been in the real thing, but you do feel it in the sim. I mean, it's the airplane without being the airplane. So I definitely got exposed to it. And one of the things that we used it on was basically kind of like a high and fast approach type thing. And they told us to use the speed brakes to show us how they worked.
Right. Good. It's a great demonstration, especially in the sim.
Oh yeah. And even coupling with that automation, man, I'm just, you guys have it so good in the airlines with your navigational systems and how well that it works and how accurate it is in comparison to the GA world. The GA world, yes, we do have GPS based stuff and we are using, that, but it almost seems that you guys are using more and more LNAV, VNAV based stuff rather than, the ground-based facilities which we are using,
Right.
The only time that I think that you guys actually ever do use the ground-based facilities is when you program in the ILS approach into whatever airport that you're going into, and it loads it through your GPS and sets everything up that way.
Yeah, we'll call the FMS, the flight management system. So the flight management system controls your navigation, your flight directors. And so, what happens is when we come in to shoot an ILS approach, we'll load that into the box or the FMS system. It uses both the GPS coordinate information and the ground base frequency, localizer, glide slope information, and it overlays it. And then when you arm an approach and activate it, it will fly your flight management GPS backed route up until the point where it captures the localizer. Then it'll fly the localizer. So it's using that ground based frequency. It's so advanced that if the frequency fails, it'll even tell you. It'll have a flag on your PFD telling you that, hey, you've lost the localizer. And just the other day on my last trip, which was about a week and a half ago, we were coming into Dallas, actually, on the last day on a turn. We were supposed to land at Dallas, swap airplanes, and then back to Ontario and be done. And we didn't read the ATIS all the way through. It's something that is called complacency. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Ooh.
So we read the ATIS.
Never.
Yeah, you never heard of that? So we read the ATIS. Never. We got, of course, the wind, the temperature, the barometric pressure, the ATIS information, and we looked, read a little bit further which runways were being used. And then there's, if anybody has printed out a METAR or an ATIS in Dallas, it's like, a page of writing. So we kind of stopped and we're like, oh, okay, well, they're using the ILS, whatever. And visuals. I said the visuals to 17 center, I think it was. Or actually it was 18 right. Visuals to 18 right. So I'm like, okay, visual 18 right. I briefed it, backed up by the ILS, 18 right. And I'm all, confident. And captain's like, great, do a great job. So the autopilot's on, I program it, I arm the approach, and I can see the airport. And they gave us a heading, we're cleared the visual. Okay. And I can see the airport. And it's like something's not displayed correctly. There's like a little green, what we call a bar or brick, that is supposed to show up. And then just like an ILS, it should come over. And as soon as it's centered on your PFD, it should capture the localizer. The flight director should then mirror this green bar, and you should fly this course. It should turn and fly inbound. I'm like, where's the green bar? I should have some kind of deflection by now. And the airplane's still moving along, trucking on about a 45 to final. And I go, this is not right. So I kick off the autopilot. By the time I react, which was a nice smooth reaction, to get the airplane basically on a final, we had gone through what would have been the localizer a little bit. The captain's like, yeah, it didn't capture it. I wonder what's going on. So then like all the wheels start spinning really fast in my head. And I'm like, oh crap! I hope there's not an airplane next to us. Let's get back on course quickly. So, we didn't vary off enough to anyone to even notice. The controller didn't know. Nobody noticed really, but I noticed. I know that we were kind of not lining up. I got us back on course, lined up back, and then the captain goes, "Mine didn't capture it either. Did we arm the approach? What's going on?" So all our wheels are spinning at a critical phase of flight. And granted, we were still like 10 miles out. It wasn't like we were close to the ground or anything. And so I got it all centered up. And then I look over on the center pedestal and I see that the printout from the ATIS. And my eyes just kind of go to it real quick. And I see down at the bottom, it says, localizer glide slope 18 right, OTS. Read the entire ATIS. and my favorite thing, which they always kind of put at the bottom, wind shear advisories are in effect.
Ugh.
Which then, bodes the question, did you brief the escape procedure that is required in our standard operating procedures on your briefing of the approach, what to do in case you get a wind shear close to the ground, So, yeah, read the whole ATIS, folks. Don't get complacent. Yeah. Don't do what I did. Granted, no airplanes or pilots were harmed in this example.
Yeah,
but, no. Yeah, it could have been ugly. And if I would have just sat there going, oh, what's it doing? Scratching my head, children of the magenta line are real. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that goes into what we talked about in day 4. One of the topics was the voluntary safety programs. Did you guys at least ASAP your thing there just to CYA? No? Okay.
No, we didn't ASAP it because I caught it in such a manner where we did not interfere with the safety zone of the left runway. Okay. We didn't get into that approach. That was not a runway in use for landing anyway. So yeah. It was kind of a moot point. I just noticed, because I had done it thousands of times, I just noticed that, hey, I noticed it before. Like I noticed it at the point where it was supposed to start having an indication of a localizer, and it didn't. And I thought it should be at least a half a deflection by now. And so I kicked off the autopilot and hand flew the airplane fine. Yes, we kind of went a little bit past the center, where normally it would start the turn a little early so that when it rolls out, you're right on localizer center. So yeah, we went past it a little bit and came right back, but we were far enough from the airport and away from any traffic that it really was a non-event. And I caught it. It was one of those threat and error management examples, the TEM, right? The Swiss cheese effect. So a couple things got through the Swiss cheese, right? Through the holes. One, I didn't notice the ATIS, and I didn't brief it that way. The second, the captain, who was pilot monitoring, didn't notice the ATIS, didn't catch me not saying, hey, the localizer glide slope's not working, because we could have loaded a GPS for that runway as a backup. Because over at Legacy, we always want a ground-based or a backup to a visual approach. We're not allowed to just shoot visual approaches. If there is some kind of approach published that's working, we should be using that as a backup to heighten safety and situational awareness. And so I missed all that. But the fact that that little indicator, the green bar, that should appear at the bottom of the PFD somewhere when you're within about half a mile from your course, it should appear that far out. And it didn't. And I noticed it. And it got me thinking. And so when I looked at the runway visually and saw it and thought, the airplane's not going to intercept. Before we crossed the center line, I had shut off the autopilot and just lowest level of automation, back to basics. Cessna 172, just bank the airplane, get it back on course. And that's what happened. It was a non-event. So I did an ASAP. Now, if I would have not noticed it until we were like well past the localizer, and then ATC said, hey, where are you going? Then yes, I would have absolutely ASAP'd it. It takes about 5 minutes. The software is very intelligent. You just plug in your flight number. It knows who you're flying with. All you have to do is go, I messed up. My bad. I mean, it's not that simple, but it really doesn't take very long, and it's no harm, no foul.
And that's one of the things that we learned on day 4 was about CRM, TEM, all the Swiss cheese model, how it's designed, and safety programs. And if you do get to do something in not in a malicious or you do it involuntarily, right? Like you accidentally, bust through final, you submit this report so that you can be like, hey, look, I know I messed up, or I know we messed up. Like, this is what happened. This is the cause of it. And this is what we're going to do to fix it. And they go, cool, don't do it again.
Right. Intentional non-compliance, I think, is what the FAA says, that ASAP will not protect you from intentional non-compliance.
Yeah, intentional non-compliance and anything with drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, which is, in their eyes, intentional.
Yeah. And then we also learned about FOQA.
Oh, FOQA.
Oh, FOQA.
Oh, those airplanes, man, they'll rat on you. Freaking rat.
Oh, God, yeah.
Snitches get stitches.
and they do snitch on you. But it takes some time for them to kind of like process what happened on the flight, and then they give you this call and then say, hey, First Officer Tony, we noticed that on your flight that you guys decided to fly a little too fast, and you guys did this, and you go, okay, cool, well, we're going to submit an ASAP report about it, and thank you for your time.
Yeah. I've been called a few times, especially at the beginning of my career at Legacy Airlines. The FOQA called me and were like, "Yeah, Tony, 2 weeks ago you flew a flight in the Phoenix. Can you tell me about that? Like, can you be more specific?" And like, yeah, well, according to the data, the airplane got very slow and went into toga lock. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that flight.
I remember that. Yeah, can you tell me what happened? Do I have to? And I totally told them what happened. I was like, it was my bad. I did file an ASAP on that one because we both they swapped to runways to the last second in Phoenix. They're like, hey, do you want runway 27? Like, yeah, sure. And like, all right, you cleared. So, lowest level automation, autopilot off, captain's down here, forgot to turn off the flight directors. When you have auto throttles or auto thrust levers, yeah, you always go autopilot off, flight directors off. Otherwise, what's it going to do? It's going to
tell on you.
It could give you flight idle, which is what it did.
Yeah.
Because I'm not touching the thrust levers. It's supposed to be all automatic. But the airplane,
that's why you always
safety margins worked. And as soon as it happened, I was like, oh, crap. And I knew what I did. And I, flew the airplane by hand. And it was fine. But We got
Didn't
slow
they tell
enough.
you click, 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 click?
Yeah, click, 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 click. Yeah, I'm sure they did. But when you're end of a day, you've been flying for 8 or 9 hours, and all you want to do is see the back of your eyelids at some hotel room somewhere. Yeah, sometimes you make dumb mistakes, and I know because I've made them all.
You know what else I also learned throughout this class? Never, ever, ever tell the airplane it's the go home leg.
No, because that's Murphy's Law.
Oh yeah, no, you don't mention go home leg.
Nope.
You don't say anything about
Nope.
it. The last one, we're getting ready to go home.
Nope.
Well, I'm ready to be in my bed tonight.
Nope.
None of that. None of that.
Nope. And I love it when the captain goes, "Hey, if we get there 10 minutes early, I can make my commute flight." And you go, "Why'd you say that? Why?
Yeah,
why would you do that to me?"
You're not making your connection flight,
and then all
because
of a sudden
now you're going to be delayed on the ground.
Ding, Captain, we got a broken seat back here. Ding. We overfueled your aircraft by 4,000 pounds. Ding. Oh, this screen just went blank. We got to call maintenance. Ding. Oh, you're at a ground stop. Like, you see what you did? What did you do?
That's like the little the living the dream Lego.
It's
video.
Exactly right. That guy's a genius.
Captain, the tray table on seat 22B doesn't work. What do you mean it doesn't work? I mean, here it is. It doesn't work.
Yep. Exactly. So you learned a lot. You get 4 days of ground school. You learned an exceptional amount of not just facts and figures to pass a test, but you learned a lot about the industry. This is extremely valuable stuff.
No, it really is.
And how much did you pay for this?
Zero.
Wait a minute. What? Tell me about this. Zero?
Oh, so the wonderful company of Sandpiper, due to the mass amount of hiring that needs to be done industry-wide, there's either two choices to do this course. One, you pay for it out of pocket on your own and you go through it. It's like $5 or $6 grand to go through it. I don't know the actual cost because Sandpiper picked up the bill for me. Or you go to a regional airline, like the guys at our SkyWest class that were all in there with us, or the three Sandpiper guys, me, Chris Garvey, and Philip Gilly. I think I said his name right. Philip Gilly. He's my sim partner, and I don't even know his last name. That we're all going to Sandpiper together, and Sandpiper's picking up the tab for us because it's a part of the culture. That's what happens now, is because they want you to be a part of their airline. Every airline right now, whether it's SkyWest, Envoy, Piedmont, PSA, Mesa, Republic, Spirit, Frontier. I mean, there's all those airlines in all these classes. You look at the doors, you see all of them.
Yeah. They're
picking up the tabs for these people because it needs to be done. It is a requirement to get your ATP.
Yeah.
And in order to get your ATP, you have to go through this course. Well, in order to go through this course, a company has to pick it up for you.
Yeah. And let's say they pick it up. It's actually quite quite genius marketing, because now they've paid for this course. They've given you the conditional letter. You've interviewed there. You were given the conditional letter of employment. Mm-hmm. So they want you there. They don't want you send meeting applications to other regionals and then going, oh, well, I like them better, so I'm going to go there. They've taken the time to interview you, and they've given you the conditional letter. By getting you into this course as quickly as possible, they now have you at least on the hook, because you've taken the course, and now you go, you know what? Over at Gold Standard Airline, they're offering me a job flying a bigger airplane. I'm going to go there. Now they're going to send you a bill.
Yep. And that I had to sign I want to call it an NDA, right? Non-disclosure agreement, but it's not. I had to sign a contract basically saying that, like, I will go through this course and be to the airline for, I think it's a year.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I pay back the course fees.
Agreement in principle, I think an AIP agreement in principle would say, okay, you have to go through, make it through the Sandpiper training and be on the line through probation through your first year. And once you've reached your second year of employment, now if you leave for any reason, you won't be on the hook. And I think if you stay there 6 months and decide an opportunity comes up, I think it's a prorated amount that you pay back. I don't remember the exact verbiage in the contract, but it's not like you're on the hook for the whole thing. But yeah, absolutely. They now have your loyalty financially.
Yep, they got me for a year for that, and then I think it's 3 years for the 15 grand they're throwing at me.
Wait, what?
Yep,
So they're
they're
helping you with flight training expenses and time building?
no, this is 15 grand that they're throwing at me to come join their company.
So this is a signing
10
bonus.
Yes, this is 100% a signing bonus.
Okay, so you're getting a
I ha-
signing bonus to go and work at Sandpiper for
Mhm.
your first year, and if you leave within 3, they're gonna
I'm on the hook for 15 grand.
15 grand. So they're now again they're building loyalty through financial penalty.
In a way, though, if you think about it, right? I'm not denying it. They are. But at the same time, they're trying to, I wouldn't say sink their claws into you, but they're trying to grab you before Gold Standard or before,
Yeah.
the any other airline does, because everybody's hurting. And if Gold Standard picks me up, which they have, which I do have to email them at this point to say thanks, but no thanks. Because everything's all set in motion for me to come back out here on the 10th, which I'll get to in a minute.
Mhm.
But I got to email Gold Standard to say thanks, but no thanks, because both Gold Standard and Sandpiper have offered me jobs.
Yeah.
And obviously I want to kind of stay with Sandpiper because, we talked about this in the last episode, to be able to flow into legacy and be a legacy, right?
Yeah, right.
So, which to me isn't a bad thing. Like, okay, so 15 grand for 3 years. That's 3 years I have to stay at Sandpiper, and then I can go look elsewhere. Okay,
Which
by
will
that time I'll probably be.
by those 3 years. You'll blink an eye and be like, "Oh my God, where do they go?" Yeah.
No, trust me, I know. I'm fully aware of it. And in 3 years, I could be sitting left seat at Sandpiper. And Philip told me one of his friends just got a $35,000 captain retention bonus at Sandpiper.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there, you can see that the money's there.
Yeah.
I know that some of the cadets, like I met a guy who just got hired to Sandpiper. He is a UND. I don't know if he's graduated or not, but he attends UND. He's a cadet in the program. Just got hired at Sandpiper with 240 hours, and he will have seniority greater than me because he is pen and inked basically 2 days ago.
That's
my
great.
pen and ink won't be official until the 10th.
Right. So that's the great thing about being accepted into the cadet program over at Sandpiper, because as a cadet, you are still building time and flight instructing, and your seniority at the company is building to the point where by the time the year or two go by where you have enough hours to take your ATP CTP, then by then a couple of years will go by. But then when you get on the line, your schedule is going to be fantastic because
Right.
your hire date goes back years versus the other guy that's in class with you. Their hire date started yesterday. So that cadet program, if you can get in, we've had the cadet mentors on the show. Kyle's a cadet mentor. We've had the cadet recruiters on the show, and it's just a fantastic organization and program. It's not easy to get into. You are selected, the chosen few, and you really need to be lucky. Really, have that passion for aviation. That's what they want to see more than anything. It doesn't matter if you have 0 hours or 1,000 hours or more. They don't discriminate with age or anything. If you get selected into the program, all you have to do is keep it up.
I know the couple caveats. The only reason why I never applied for it was because I didn't teach at one of their approved schools, and that's at the end of the day, that's what the hard part is.
Yep.
But I got to give a shout out to him, Keith Griffin, out of UND. Kid's 21 years old and will be set for the rest of his life with an airline career. One interview and he will go from Sandpiper into Legacy and never have to worry about a thing. So I give good credit to program there. No, this kid doesn't. This kid only has. You ready for this, Tony?
Yeah.
3.5 hours of dual given.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
3.5 hours of dual given, and this kid is hired to basically be at Legacy Airlines at 21 years old.
I'm telling you,
3 hours.
The opportunities are there. You just have to kind of know where to put the direction of the airplane, really, and just let it go.
No, that is 100% it. Yeah, no, the getting's good for this industry right now. I mean, clearly you can hear a 21-year-old kid is getting hired out of college to be one interview and done, go from Sandpiper all the way into Legacy Airlines.
Wow.
Doesn't it make you just a little bit jealous?
A little bit? Are you kidding me? A lot of bit.
Like, I wish these programs were in effect when I was young, and I should have pulled my head out of my ass when I was his age, but I didn't.
Yeah, that's the thing,
but here he is, set for the rest of his life. You know what? And that's why I said I got to give a good shout out to him, because he's gonna be set, and he's gonna outrank me in seniority, just because his pen and ink date technically was 2 days ago. Yeah. And my pen and ink date won't be until the 10th.
Right.
So,
well, hey, this is a very interesting time in the aviation and airline community, and it seize the moment, man. Get out there. If you're listening to this show and you're thinking, man, I love, listening to these guys talk about airplanes and, great. I mean, I talked to 4 flight attendants in the past few months that are all working on their ratings. One, she I think was a commercial CFI. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to be at here someday. And I'm going to go to Sandpiper. And she was just building her hours, getting ready to pull the trigger, and working as a flight attendant to help pay for flight school and training. And I just was so impressed.
I'm actually impressed with that too. So funny you say that. I actually met a guy in the van on the way back to, or from the airport to the hotel the first night we were here. And I didn't realize this was the Sandpiper interview hotel. I thought that, or that Legacy put people up here, right? I thought this was only Sandpiper. So
yeah,
that he was interviewing to become a flight attendant for Legacy. And right, which is cool, right? He's an older guy. He said he was in banking, and he's, now he wants to kind of redo his career. He's always wanted to fly, but he figured because he's older, at 48 years old, that he's too old to start, right? And he has his private. And I just looked at him, and even the van driver, who is a commercially rated CFI pilot, looks at him and goes, "You're never too old. Like, how old are you? 48? Wow. As long as you've got 6 years till retirement, the airlines will hire you." And he's like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, they will hire you." And I went, "Yeah, they'll hire you. Look into doing some fast track training, get you through, and go into Sandpiper, or, since you're going to be looking at flight attendant at Legacy, your foot will already be in the door. Why not try to use that to work into Legacy or Sandpiper to be a pilot?" Yeah. So, and it blew his mind that he, at 48 years old, he could still do it.
Yeah. I mean, because we hire people all the time that have come over from another airline, and granted, okay, they have a lot more experience, but they're in their 40s, 50s, sometimes even 60s. I mean, as long as you can do the job, you've got a good head on your shoulders. You're not an asshole at the end of the day. Really, that's the main thing. Yeah. And you have the experience that you need. Absolutely. When the timing is as good as it is now, really, there's so many opportunities up there.
Well, and there's a guy that I met who's in the ATP CTP class that started Wednesday, right? So the guys at our class, the three of us, we would hang out down in the lobby and hang out and study, because let's face it, I'm not going to study if I'm in my room. I'm going to watch Netflix, right, and I'm going to, not do anything. So I'm going to force myself. I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to start studying. So we just kind of made little study groups and would reinforce the questions from Shepherd Air with each other. Like, if one knew it and the other didn't, it would be like, okay, this is why. Or if we both didn't, then we'd read through the explanation and be like, oh, okay, cool. Let's talk through it so it cements in our head. Well, in doing so, we met the next cadre of ATP CTP class members that were coming through, and met the interviewees, right? Like I met the Keith, and there's a guy I met who got hired. He's a A10 driver out of Kansas City.
Oh.
Yeah, super awesome guy. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And super humble about it too. Like, you know, everybody's sitting there like, "Oh, you're an A10 pilot. Oh, that's so cool." And he's just like, "Yeah, it's just the plane that I fly."
Low and slow.
We're like,
with a cannon.
And slow, but yeah.
That's the sound of freedom.
With a plane that was designed around a gun and not the other way around.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like doing that, like we met these people, right? And one of those guys that I met, he's 54 years old. And he is going through ATP CTP for Sandpiper Airlines and is going to be in orientation with me on the 10th. So tell me how you're too old to start this. And again, he's a second career guy.
It's a mindset.
It is 100%.
It really is. It's a mindset.
So
yeah. So let's get into. I'm so excited about this. Hearing about the simulators. You got to sit into 3 days of simulators and a different one every day. Well, I mean, what was that for? I mean, how does sitting in a simulator prepare you to take an ATP written?
So that doesn't necessarily prepare you to take the written, right? It just kind of gives you hands-on familiarization, right? But it's to kind of like cement the stuff that you learned in class, right? Taking the theory, right? We always talk about this, right? There's the theory of stuff, and then you do the practicality of stuff out in the real world. Mm-hmm. Well, we can't be unleashed into the real world yet because we're not rated. So we go into simulators, and we took these like the first night in the sim. I was in a 737-800, which holds a special place in my heart, right? Because that's the airline that my father retired off of from Legacy Airlines. So that was to me, that was one of the coolest ones because it's the plane my dad flew, right? But that got us into like the automation side and how to use automation and the navigation and programming the box and flying with the navigation and, you know, doing the point and shoot method of making sure that you've got it set right and verifying it with your co-pilot to make sure that it's set right, and, you know, and programming the box, make sure it's set right. The one thing I will say, out of the 3 boxes, the 7.3 box seemed the most intuitive to me. The menus made sense. The way that the button layouts made sense. Not knocking the Airbus by any means. I like the way that the Airbus flies and handles, but man, the box on that was so much easier to program and deal with than the Airbus. Yeah,
the Airbus is a simpler box, but it's limited in its vertical navigation features. There are software updates that Legacy Airlines will be receiving here in the next 30 days. It's a huge software update that will change many of those aspects that we often complain about on the Airbus fleet, that the Boeing fleet seems to have a little bit better. The Boeing FMS system is a lot more kind of intuitive to what a pilot needs. It's a little bit easier to manipulate. Rob, I wish Rob was here because he could tell you the differences and the pros and cons. We've talked about that a few times, but maybe one day we'll have a show that talks about that.
I'm sure once he hears this and, you know, you guys start talking about it, he's going to be like, "Oh yeah, no, the 7.3 is just, you know, the box is so much better, but man, I like the way the Airbus flies." He's going to say the same thing I did.
Right.
I almost guarantee it.
And the Embraer, the one that Sandpiper had on the 145, the universal stack, that one, they called it the Barbie jet. It was a little bit oversimplified and easy to program, but it was very limited in what it could do. And it was very slow. It was a very antiquated system. I mean, I think it had like 516 megabyte storage in there. So like you could easily... at one point, they were removing approaches. They're like, because of data storage limitations, some airports will not have the approaches loaded into the FMS system. Please verify before accepting an approach that it is actual something you can select in the FMS system. So it had its limitations, and I actually learned that I could program it so fast and skip ahead, to pages that aren't even on the screen yet to the point where you can actually crash it. And I'm just saying the computer. So I had to slow down sometimes. But yeah, the 175 and the 190s, those FMS systems are a lot more advanced. The 175, again, Rob could wax poetic on the little mouse it has, and the screen.
Oh, that was awesome.
My God, it's. I did not have the opportunity to fly the 175. I mean, I did, but I chose to not do that. And that's one thing that I kind of regret, that I didn't have that experience, because that system is super uber modern compared to even the Boeing and the Airbus.
No, and that's out of the three, right? Obviously, day one was to get you into navigation and automation and stuff like that, right? But when we went into days 2 and 3 into the sims, like it didn't have like much into the box as we did in the 7.3 time, but we did obviously have to do a little bit of programming here and there. And we flew the 170, which is the 175, the 190. They're all the same cockpit. It's it's the difference between a 319, a 320, and a 321.
Right.
So, but yeah, those two boxes really seemed very user friendly and intuitive and just really good. And then we get into the Airbus, and the box was good, right? But the better part of it was the whole automation suite and how literally everything is done and taken care of for you. But okay, so day one, let's rephrase it. Sim sessions 1 and 2 were automation and navigation, right? So we kind of got to learn how to use all that and do all that. And we did a Cat 3 auto land in the 7.3.
Okay, so day one was on the 737.
Yep, and that was the non-motion FTD. So it's considered a level 5 simulator, but it's you look at the inside of it and it's an airplane. I'm going to see if I can change my background here and throw that one.
It's the same thing. It's just not on the hydraulics, and therefore it's a non-motion flight training device.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Right. I'm changing my background for the YouTube video here so that people can see there's the 7.3.
There you go. Wow, it looks cold and snowy out there.
No, that one was where were we? I think it was a Kavu day at Memphis.
Oh, okay.
Right. So, but we did a lot of things out of Memphis, and then a couple out of Reno because we needed to do high elevation and get the jip whiz going and stuff like that. So, but the 7.3 was really cool. And then day 2 of sim was sim lesson 4 and 5. And don't ask me why we skipped 3. It's a weird way that they organize their sim sessions and everything. But sim session 4 and 5 was high altitude operations, upset recovery, and adverse weather. And that was where we learned the high altitude stall and doing a high altitude stall recovery, upset recoveries, right? And the one thing I learned with the Embraers, in normal airplanes, right? If you go to try to do a maneuver, right, you want to kind of maneuver the yoke, and you're doing something like this, so you kind of spread your legs out so that people can, move the yoke around freely.
Yeah.
You do the complete opposite in Embraer.
Yeah, bring them in.
I had
kneecaps.
100%. Yep. Because the ram's horn, you're doing this with it versus, doing this. Mm-hmm. And for those viewers who can't, or listeners who can't see us, right? It's more of a twisting motion of the arms, like you're driving a car, versus a traditional yoke of an airplane.
Yeah.
And my partner in the Sims, he was doing the first upset recovery stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. Let me spread my legs out so that you can, have full control of the yoke. I was this close to having my knee smashed with that ram's horn.
Yeah.
And I sucked him in real quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised they didn't brief you on that as part of the sim briefing, because that's a great sim briefing to give. Especially for someone who's not been in that airplane. So in a traditional Boeing aircraft, the yoke looks like an upside down horseshoe that's connected to the yoke in the middle. And, as you can turn it, right, or you can pull it back and forth, and any combination thereof. So really you have to move your legs aside so that you're not getting hit with the yoke as it comes back when you're doing something where you have to pull back suddenly, or some kind of maneuver, right? A recovery maneuver. Because normally you would never operate an aircraft like that. I mean, that's how things get damaged. With the Embraer, it looks almost like the letter M, right? So they call it the ram's horns. It's like kind of like a bicycle handlebar. And so this letter M, right, is connected at the bottom of the middle to the yoke, which goes backwards and forwards. But then it goes up, and that's where like the upper tips of the M are where the push to talk or the trim button is, right? And then where you hold on to it are on the outside portions. And it has these like little, like you got a photo there for those on the video if they see it.
I'm trying to move out of the way for the people.
Yeah, it's got a little flat area so that your hand can rest there comfortably, and it's kind of cool. It's kind of like a motorcycle handlebar, and there's no twisting involved here. But so when you turn that thing, it's like those McDonald's arches, right? And one at the bottom of the M, it goes right into your kneecap. If you have your legs spread out, you have to bring your knees to the center. So it's opposite of what you would do in a Boeing aircraft. And if you don't know that, and the first time someone goes full aileron deflection to the right, for example, your knees are out there, right on that kneecap, whack, whack. And I've had people get hurt that got hurt. I have friends that have gotten hurt, like especially in training in new hire class. It's like, God, it's like I forgot. And actually, I have I think around 8,000 or 9,000 hours on that airplane. And even later in my career, it's just you're unexpecting that reaction and your knee is there and you forgot and you couldn't move it out on time and you will get whacked and get a good bruise.
Oh yeah. No, it definitely, it came within like a half an inch from smacking into me. And I quickly learned, that obviously there's those times back in the, flight instructing world where, you get those students doing the flight control checks and you're not paying attention, or your instructor is not paying attention, and you're like, all right, flight controls, whack. And you have the yoke hit him in the knee, right? I was notorious with that with my flight instructor. He was a 6'3", 6'4", like 260-pound dude, like big dude, right? And I would go through the checklist, and in my mind, I'm reading it. Okay, flight controls, wham, wham.
And you're not looking over it.
Oh, yeah, no. I would always forget. Yeah. And I would go full scale deflection on him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't get hurt, because some people have really gotten hurt with that. Yeah, the Airbus, it doesn't happen very often.
No. And, I know I've said this. I said this when we were doing our little pre-show talk that, like, you Airbus pilots are so spoiled. Like, so that was the next day was sim session 3, and that was doing adverse weather and runway safety. And that's kind of where we did our high altitude stuff and the TARA type stuff and what we did. And I didn't think this could happen, but I oversped an Airbus.
Oh,
yeah. So my TARA, it had me, I saw the plane, right? And, you hear the traffic, right? And then all of a sudden it says traffic, climb, right? So 172 world, what do you think I do? Toga, climb.
Oh, you went to Toga?
Oh, I went to Toga. And then immediately after I went Toga, it said descend.
Uh-huh.
So it had me climb and then descend. And I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And I didn't pull the throttles back at all. Right. So now I'm going down at Toga power, nose down at like 9,000 feet per minute, because you see the little green
rocket
bar.
ship you'll ever get.
So yeah, I oversped an Airbus.
Then you hear ding 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 ding.
Yeah, that's exactly the next thing I heard. The sim instructor's like, well, let's talk about. Hey, what happened there?
Exactly.
So I definitely learned that, like, in the Airbus world, which this is the other thing that I learned that I absolutely love. You go set your takeoff power, right? To flex, Toga, whatever you're doing. Set it, you climb out, 1,000, 1,500 feet, and you get that flashing message on your PFD that says throttles to climb.
Oh, yeah.
or throttles to cruise, I should say. So you just knock it back to the next notch, and you don't touch them again until the airplane calls you a retard when you're landing.
Yeah.
And that's it. I was so impressed with that.
Yeah, every like operator has a little spin on their TARA procedure. For us, nothing has to happen like extremely fast. No Jackie Chan motions here. You know, it's just all right. It says traffic, you know, climb. So all you have to do is go click, 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 right? And then you pull back gently into the green arc. The green arc can be really thick. The green arc can be really small because there can be traffic above you and below you. And the conflict is with the one below you or at your altitude. So it wants you to climb, but not too rapidly. Some others, especially when they're like coming right at you, and it goes traffic, traffic, climb, climb, climb. And so now the green arc is like way up there. So you really have to pitch up. And yes, going in a toga is absolutely an option. But then after you're clear of conflict, you want to slowly bring the nose over and bring the power levers or the thrust levers back to either MCT or climb or, you know, back to cruise if you've recovered completely. So yeah, there's different ways. There are different scenarios. It's not all the same. You could get a descending, you know, TARA. And again, lowest level automation, click, 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 click. Did I ever tell you the story about the RA that I received while I was in the bathroom?
No.
Yeah, true story. This happened like 3 or 4 years ago. So we're cruising along. We're on a flight to Los Angeles. It was the go home leg, and about an hour out.
Did you tell the airplane it was a go home leg?
No, we didn't tell the airplane it was a go home leg. Okay. Everything was going smoothly, and about an hour out, as this is back before the change in the FAR, when above 27,000 feet, if one pilot left their station, the other pilot had to don their oxygen mask. And
this was they did mention that in our training, by the way, that it recently just changed to flight level 410.
Yeah. Yeah. So above 410, one person must have it on all the time there. So the policy was if anyone left their station, like to go to the bathroom, and we did the whole swap with the flight attendant, the remaining pilot had control of the aircraft, control the radios, and they had to have their oxygen mask on and communication established. So that was standard operating procedure. So the captain says, yeah, let's do a bathroom break before we start getting in with the arrival and everything into Los Angeles. Okay, sure. He says, oh, you go ahead, go first. I'm like, okay. Mind you, it's at night. We're at 36,000 feet. The autopilot's on. It's smooth as glass. The seatbelt sign is off. Everything is fine and dandy. So he puts on the oxygen mask. We do the whole swap. I go to the bathroom. I maybe in there 60 seconds, come out. I pick up the intercom. I press the little button that I need to press. And simultaneously, I hear, which is the indication that someone's calling from the cabin. And I also hear through the door, traffic, climb, ding, 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 boop, 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 woot, 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 which is, he had the traffic, he had the RA, he turned off the autopilot, he turned off the level of automation, he started a climb. And I was like, holy shit. So I hang up the phone so that's one less distraction. And I can feel the airplane climbing rapidly. And the other flight attendant that's there, you know, for security purposes, looks at me and is like, what? I'm like, oh my God, Captain had an RA. He's like, what's that? I go, well, there's never mind. So I can feel the airplane climbing, and then I can feel the airplane kind of level off, and how it's going. I can feel it kind of descending, and then I feel it level off. And I'm just sitting there like, holy crap, you know, what's going on up there? And all of a sudden, the door swings wide open. The flight attendant grabs me by my tie, pulls me into the cockpit, slams the door shut. I look over. My captain has the O2 mask over one eye, you know, clamped on his head like a freaking alien from the movie Aliens, right? Then he's got Dr. Pepper stain all down his shirt. He's sweating profusely. He had just gotten the airplane settled again. And he looks at me with this one eye covered. And I'm like, dude, I can't leave you alone for a second. What the hell? He goes, well, He goes, that's never happened to me before. He goes, holy crap, man. He goes, she asked me a question. So I lifted the oxygen mask on. I unpressurized it, lifted it up like this, turned around to face her so I could answer her question. And meanwhile, I figured, well, I'll have a sip of my Dr. Pepper. So I had a sip of his Dr. Pepper. So in one hand, he had a face mask. He's talking to her going, oh, yeah, whatever. And he's drinking his Dr. Pepper. And he said, simultaneously, I got, you're calling in. I got the traffic RA. He goes, I dropped the Dr. Pepper. It exploded on the seat next to me and just stained my shirt. I let go of the oxygen mask. It clamped over one eye. He goes, with my free hand, I pressed the autopilot disconnect button, grabbed the yoke, and then I had to disconnect both flight directors because now it's yelling at me, climb, climb, climb. So I'm climbing like a bat out of hell. I get to about 260 feet above our cruising altitude of 36,000 feet. And now air traffic control is saying, Legacy, where are you going? And he replies with responding to an RA. And then it says, okay, clear of conflict, and the next thing on the radio was Southwest say altitude. South of leveling off at 350. They were climbing like a rocket in the 7.3 for whatever reason, and it tricked the TARA system because it looks at trends and it goes, well, if you're gonna be at that altitude within so many seconds, it's going to trigger an RA, which is exactly what it did. So air traffic controller said, Legacy, you can descend back to 360. And the captain's like, oh, okay, we're descending. So he descends back down to 360, gets the airplane situated, gets the automation back on, turns on the autopilot. Then he looks over at her and goes, let him in. So I was like, oh my God. And I was really impressed that he handled it. Like, we were laughing and he was like really distraught and adrenaline was pumping. I'm like, well, do what you got to do, get cleaned up, whatever. I'll hopefully that won't happen to me, So he's gone for a while and he comes back and, the flight attendant leaves. And so the two of us are up there and he's quiet. He's like not talking. I'm kind of worried. I'm like, are you okay, man? He's like, I was thinking about it. He goes, those FOQA guys are going to call me tomorrow. I went, really? He went, yeah, it was, altitude deviation due to an RA. They might just want to know what happened. And they're going to call me. I'm like, yeah. He goes, I'm not going to answer the phone. I'm like, why? He goes, I want them to call you. I'm like, excuse me? He goes, I want them to call you, and I want you to tell them the truth. When they ask you what happened during the RA, I want you to tell them, I don't know, I wasn't on the flight deck. True story, man. I can't make this shit up.
I don't think I've laughed harder in a story. Oh my God. Oh, that's fucking fantastic. Oh, Jesus.
So it bodes the question, okay? You're a new hire on probation, on IOE. You're flying a 180,000-pound aircraft with 186 souls on board. You're at 36,000 feet, and the captain says, I got to take a piss. And he or she goes to the bathroom. All right, it's Susan. She smokes 5 packs a day. I got to take a piss. So Susan goes to the bathroom, right? Now you're up there, fat, dumb, and happy. The flight attendant's like chit-chatting. Oh, so you're new. Oh, hi, how are you? Okay. Oh, where do you live? Or where are you based? All this stuff. And all of a sudden you get traffic, climb, ding, ding, ding. So are you going to know how to react? Are you going to have confidence in your skill set to do everything correctly, swiftly, not too swiftly, but, in a timely manner, and being the only pilot at the controls and on the flight deck? Are you going to have that confidence? The answer emphatically must be yes. It got me thinking when that happened. And with all my years of experience and all my years on the flight line for a couple decades now, I always kind of revert back to that question. If it all depends on me, will I be ready? And that's why we get paid what we get paid. That's why we go through the rigorous training that is so expensive to do that most people go, it's not worth it. I spend $200,000 to learn how to fly an airplane and make, chump change for years until I build seniority. Well, that's why. That's why.
No, to me, that it doesn't matter. You could pay me peanuts and I would be happy to fly.
How dare you, sir?
Oh, please. I've heard you say several times on your show, and other pilots have said several times on your show, that you don't have to pay us, right? We enjoy doing it, right? We would do it for free, but the pay is a nice aspect of it.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, you're right. We're the last line. We're the two people up in that cockpit that hold in the balance the 186 of our newest, closest, best friends in the back.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing holding them from plummeting straight down to the earth and dying.
On average, in my experience, and some people might look at me and say, Tony, you're full of shit. And that's fine. But in my experience, in my time in this industry, I would say about 3 times in a year, you will earn every red cent that you got paid for that year.
Oh, no, I 100% agree with you.
About
even
3
from
times.
The flight instructor level.
Yeah. If you're at the command of an aircraft, no matter the size, no matter the situation, there will be a time where you are tested. And the question is, how will you react? And no one can answer that but you in the time that it's happening, because you can prepare all you want. You could know every spec, every factoid about your aircraft. You can know the FARs backwards and forwards. You can know those Jeppesen charts or those NOS charts like it's reading, kindergarten books. You could be a whiz at all of it. But until you're put to the test, your reaction is really what counts. And no one can tell you how you're going to react until it happens. Once it happens that one time, you're going to either go, okay, I did everything right. I could not done anything better. Or, like most of us, you'll say, well, it worked out okay, but man, I think I'm going to do, if that ever happens again, I'll do this a little bit different, or I'll do this a little bit better, or I'll not do that part of it at all. Because we learn and we grow from our experiences like that. So yeah, it always is a testament to what we do as aviators about 3 times a year.
Yeah, no. And I 100% agree with you on that. Like, even in the flight instructing world, right? Like, when I used to teach at the old flight school that I did, it would be at least once a week that I would almost get into a midair at an uncontrolled airport, which is insane.
What?
Oh yeah, go fly down at French Valley, and you'll learn quick, fast, and in a hurry of how bad the wild, wild west is there in Temecula.
Yeah. Well, Phoenix was no different. I've had a few close calls myself. No fault of my own. No fault of my own. Just people,
No, it's just people being people in the airplanes.
It happens.
So, so that was basically it with the sims, right? Like the one cool thing I will say is we got done on the second day with lessons 4 and 5, and we wrapped up a little early. So the instructor was like, hey, what do you guys want to see, right? Like, what do you guys want to do that you probably wouldn't be able to do any other time?
Yeah.
One of the things that we did was I wanted to go up at altitude and see the coffin corner and just watch it diminish until you were basically like this, rather than, a nice spread of like 60 knots.
Yeah.
And so he brought us as close as he could, right? And then put some turbulence in with it. Yeah. And there was a time where I was flying too slow to be flying and too fast to be flying all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was really cool.
Yeah, that's an experience, and it's still impressive to this day. A lot of pilots I fly with, in the flight management system of the Airbus, it tells you what your max altitude depended upon your current conditions and the weight of the aircraft. Sometimes our max altitude is our service ceiling, and sometimes it is well below that, especially when you're very heavy, it's very hot, very low pressure day. It absolutely could be much, much lower. And if you're not careful and you accept an altitude that is, say, 35,000 feet, and you think, well, it says max 35,000 feet, let's go up to 35,000 feet. Well, if it's smooth, you could do it. But that, like you said, that coffin corner is very narrow. Now you start putting in some turbulent air, some pressure gradients, you're going to be in big trouble. And I know pilots that have a rule of 1,000 feet below max at all times. Some do 2,000 feet below max, a little bit extra conservative in my opinion. But if it's bumpy, 2,000 or 3,000 feet below max is absolutely the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
So after the simulator stuff, how did that translate into taking the written test?
So on day 2, I believe it was, they gave us a voucher code for the test, and we had it scheduled for the Wednesday that we completed the course, right? So it went basically Wednesday to Wednesday, right? So 7 days in quote classroom environment, and then the 8th day was your test. And so that was my test on Wednesday. I showed up. I took the 11:30 slot because I knew I was going to be leaving later. Way later than the 11:30 slot. Yeah, right. So anyways, I took the 11:30 slot because I figured the flight that I had out that day was a 10:30 flight back to Dallas, or back from Dallas. And I was like, okay, cool, that'll give me time to take the test. It's a 4-hour test. I can go change, I can go to the airport, got to get settled in, maybe weasel my way into the Legacy Lounge or whatever they call it, the Platinum Lounge.
The Admirals Club?
Yeah, the Admirals Club.
Are you a member?
No, but being military, they like to let you in for free.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, congratulations on your new appointment.
Oh, thank you. I got promoted in late December, so just call it January, to E7 chief.
Chief, yeah, I think we had mentioned it at some point, and I don't think I ever took the time to say congratulations. So I definitely want to say that.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. It's well welcome. So thank you. So it took the test at 11:30. It's a 125 question test. Like Tony was saying, it's a brutal test. If you want to equate it, it's the PhD of aviation. Right? This license is the PhD in aviation, and the test is no joke. It's tough. However, we use this program called Shepherd Air, and Shepherd Air is really, really good at reinforcing the memory aids and knowing what the question is saying. Because let's face it, the written tests are all they're written tests. Everybody who's taken them knows that you're taking the test to take the test. Right, your true knowledge comes out when you fly,
right,
and go through your orals. But took the test. I was taking the practice exams, and I got an 87 on a practice exam, which I figured was pretty decent going into it. Rolled out of that test in about an hour with a 93%. So
you overstudied.
Oh, I overstudied by 23%.
Well, congratulations on completing that. It's a huge milestone. And the test, we can't sit here. We could do an entire show on what to expect on an ATP test. This is not what we're here for. But what are
not at all.
What were some of the harder questions that you can remember?
Honestly, it was about the performance charts into the airplane world. Because it's the first time I've ever seen them. It's the first time ever trying to deal with them and understand them. And they were given to us. They give you the study guide, or not the study guide, the supplement, right? The book that you get on the exam.
Yeah. And
I printed it out because I can't read a chart on an iPad, right? So I need to see it.
Yep.
You're getting Q400s and CRJ 700 charts and forget what else. They're giving you like high level charts that you've never seen before, because we're in a 172 and I look at my TFD table for my climb. I don't look at this spaghetti chart that has me do these little things to come across and hit my point.
Right.
So I think that was the hardest part. And then the FARs, right? Like knowing the FARs. One of the questions was, how many flight attendants do you need on your airplane? I'm like, why do I need to know the flight attendants?
How
Right?
many
Like,
seats are on the airplane?
That's exactly it. And it's based off seat capacity, not seating how many people are on the airplane, right?
Mhm.
Like, I'll ask you this and see if you know. Let's test your ATP knowledge here, Tony.
Uh-oh. Go for
You
it.
have a 333 passenger seat jet with 298 flight attendants, or 298 passengers on board. How many flight attendants do you need for the flight?
Well, it's 1 per 50.
Okay.
So
So how many do you need?
So 2, 4, 6, 7.
Ah,
Ding, ding,
See?
ding.
hey. Well, so the next course for me, right? So obviously we can keep the listeners updated, is moving from here, right? Whenever I decide to get back to California and the weather cooperates, is I come back out here the evening of the 9th to be out here for the 10th for orientation. And the day I'm out here on the 10th is the day that I get put on payroll for Sandpiper Airlines.
Day one.
And then I have to wait for in-dock class date at that point. But that is the day that I am officially a Sandpiper employee, and I will be working my way to be a pilot in the Sandpiper world.
Good. Well, we look forward to hearing all about your adventures at the regional.
I'm super excited. I really am. And I know for the listenership out there, right? Like I have a couple former students of mine who are now listeners of the show. I've turned a lot of people onto your show, by the way.
I appreciate that.
One of them I've turned on to. The other one texted me out of the blue, and she's like, "Oh my God, I listened to this podcast and you're on it." So I got to say hi to Bella out there and Bill, who are former students of mine who listen to this show. So definitely got to put them in here as well.
And you were recognized as well. We're in the pre-show. We were talking about this. That here you are in Dallas doing your ATP CTP course, and someone looks at you and says, "Aren't you on that podcast?"
Well, it wasn't exactly like that. It was, I was talking and I'd mentioned something about your podcast and how it was the day that you're talking about your 80 knot crosswind day going into Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking about that, and Keith, the kid from UND, was like, "Oh, you listen to Squawk Ident?" I was like, "I listen. I know Tony." He's like, "How do you know Tony?" I was like, "I've been on his show." And he's like, "You're the like, you can see the wheels turning." He's like, "You're the guy that took Tony up." I'm like, "Yeah, that was me." He's like, "Oh, I figured I was listening to the show, and I knew that you're going to be out here for ATP CTP, and I was out here for interviews, and I just figured maybe we'd cross paths." And well, Keith, we did cross paths.
That is so cool. And I got to tell you, I've been doing this now, the show, for a little over 3 years. I got to admit, those listeners out there that are listening to this one, it's been a while that I've had a consistent regularity with releasing shows. Life happens. Things have been extremely busy at home. The schedules have been busy, and I'm sorry, I have not put more shows out there, but I promise the shows are going to be absolutely engaging. And as the time and schedules allow, I'll start rolling them out with a little bit more frequency. But we are super excited for some of these upcoming shows that we're having. Interviews with some people that have made a huge impact in aviation. I'm not going to spoil it. I don't want to jinx it. It's like the go home leg, right? We don't talk about the go home leg until it's done. And then we're like, sweet, we made it 30 minutes early and I made my flight. Great. Congratulations. Thanks for flying with me. So that's where I'm going to leave it. But man, Alex, I'm excited to have you on the show again. I look forward to hearing about your journey, and I know you're going to keep us updated. It's an exciting process to have you at the kind of the beginning of this aviation airline career, and really walking us through this real time.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things that I knew you were kind of looking forward to about obviously getting in my journey and all that stuff, is because, I mean, you and Rob and Roger and damn near every captain that you've had on the show hasn't been through this process in, at the earliest 20 years.
Right.
So like for the viewers and listeners out there to be able to hear somebody going through this is what I want to give back to aviation. I want to be able to let people know and mentor and be that like next generation, be the what you are to me to somebody else.
Yeah. And you know, and we've talked about, we have a common thread here, which is Captain Elmore. And I just recently had a fantastic afternoon spent with Mr. Elmore, and he and I have discussed this on the show multiple times. Leadership is all about making sure that you have enough people that you're mentoring so that when it's time for you to move on to the next stage in your career or whatnot, you have enough people to kind of take over what you've been doing and step in your shoes and mentor those people beneath them. This industry is so small, and all we really have in this world, regardless of aviation or not, is each other. And by helping each other out, being there, maybe even if it's just a word of encouragement, sometimes a simple hello, good morning, how are you, a simple text sometimes can brighten someone's day. Robin Williams is one of the famous people that I admire. We all have those people in the world that we don't know. They're just famous people. And the reason I admire Robin Williams, other than his exceptional talent, his exceptional comedic genius, was that he was very inspiring off camera. One of the most amazing things that I've ever read that came from Mr. Robin Williams is that he said, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind. Always. It is what I base the Squawk Ident show on, that treat each other with respect and be kind and really lift those around you up so that they can achieve their own personal greatness. And I really, truly hope that that is what we are all doing here on this program. Thank you so much for listening to Squawk Ident. Thank you for listening to us today. And I got to say, Alex, it's always a pleasure to have you on board. And I look forward to hearing about your next adventure.
I look forward to being able to share it. And again, being that mentor like you are to me to the new generation of pilots.
Absolutely. Well said. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap it up. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
The elite. Best of the best. We'll make you better. We'll make you better.
Do you know anything about planes?
Oh, jeez. Oh, you kill me. You really do.
Do you know anything about planes?
Captain, how soon can you land? I can't tell. You can tell me, I'm a doctor. No, I mean, I'm just not sure.
Do you know anything about planes?
Can you fly this plane and land it?
It's an entirely different kind of flying.